name is Alan. I go by Alan Santamaria, and I'm going to be presenting my research on can cold plasma treatment improve the food product development properties of cricket protein. Um, Before I start, actually, I'll talk about the program. I am a second year here at UTRGV, but I got the chance to go to Arkansas, the University of Arkansas, and they're a food science REU. I did research there, so this is my first bit of research. It's been really nice to actually be a part of a lab, work with chemicals, work with big machines, and I got to do this really cool project on kind of like property development for foods to try to actually make it a food product rather than just, for example, just cricket protein. And so I'll get into that now. So the estimates, obviously we know the population is growing. We have estimates of 9.1 billion by 2050, and therefore we really need a protein source that one is environmentally friendly. We can't rely on livestock too much, but also clean and in a sense valuable, like has a lot of protein. And so research has already been done on crickets, but specifically we're going to focus on the house cricket. One, because they're easy to grow, they are environmentally friendly, and because they have a high fat and protein content. And there's already research into high protein yields with these crickets and how to do it. So we're really going to focus on using technology. For example, what we did was cold plasma in order to get the best food properties out of this protein. So what is cold plasma? Cold plasma is just a utilization of plasma, which is the fourth state of matter, which is ionized gas. And we're going to use that ionized gas on the cricket proteins to try to modify its characteristics. And on the bottom there, left, we can see that we're going protein yield, purity, solubility, foaming, digestibility, really just see what improvements can we make to this crude protein in order to make it either one, a product, or even something just a little more soluble in maybe water so you can make protein drinks and things like that. And what the ionized gas does is it interacts with particles in the air. Specifically, what we used was ozone, so just, the air around us. And those gases are then going to become reactive species. They're going to react with the protein, and they're going to denature the proteins. A lot of these proteins are big structures, and they're not easy to digest, or they don't foam well. They're not soluble. So what we're going to use is we're going to use this cold plasma on these structures in order to maybe change their shape, see where we go from there. So first, under our materials and methods, we see that we're going to defat the cricket flour. The thing is, it is an oxidative treatment, cold plasma, and so we don't want to do that to lipids. That's going to provide some very oxidized lipids, and that's not good for us. So we're going to defat it. And then we're going to go into a adjusting pH period because, as you can see in the results section under solubility, we're following the blue curve right now because that's pre-treatment. Under 10 pH, we see that we have a high solubility. So if we do 10 pH, we're going to have all our proteins on the liquid phase as a soluble, and we're going to be able to extract the supernatant and really clear out maybe the starch, the fat. And then we're going to do that one more time, but instead we're going to go to 4.5 pH where we see that it's not going to be soluble. That way we can just get the supernatant from there of the 4.5, and then we're going to centrifuge and take the pellet because the pellet will be rich in proteins. We're going to freeze dry that, and then we're going to put that into two different groups. What we did is we had a control, which is just the protein, and we're going to test that for all the different characterization, the properties, and then we're going to go under cold plasma. So the way we do this, it's really hard to see, but that box is like probably the size of your computer, right? In terms of like width and length and just a little bit tall. So we put in these Petri dishes and we put them in for 5-minute treatments, I think 220 voltage. And then so basically these like 5-minute treatments, the thing is if you go too long, you really burn the proteins and we don't want to burn it. So we do 3 5-minute increments, and then that will be our treated proteins. And then again, we can see the characterizations that we're testing: water oil holding, digestibility, radical scavenging, which is just, I believe, oh man, I'll remember right now. There's a specific word for that. And then we have foaming and emulsification. One of the biggest things that I will say now, just as we build up, is we want to try to find something that improves so we can make a food product. And the one that I found works best would be a muffin, right? And we'll go forward from there, and then I'll bring up the muffin point later. We see that in the results, we had high purity with 79% protein purity and a 43% extractability, decent mass yield for the cricket bag that we had. Going forward, we can use the first graph we want to look at to the right there, the FTIR spectropography is going to show us really the protein structures. And so if we go to that first peak, which is amide 1, those are the secondary structures. And if we look at that blue line, we see the original protein secondary structures of the cricket protein. And if we look at the treated in the orange line, we see that there is a slight decrease, which shows us that the amount of either the amount of protein in secondary structure has been denatured or that it just reduced entirely. Then if we go to amide 2, again, that's for alpha helixes and beta sheets. We see another decrease there. So we know that our protein is actually being denatured. That is successful. That is what we're looking for, some change. We go down to solubility. And not a lot of change in the lower pH, but if we go to the higher pH, if we look at that 10 range, we do see, it doesn't look like a lot, but it is actually a 16% difference, almost a whole 16. I think it's about 15% difference in solubility at the 10 pH range. And that's really important because for things like our materials and methods, when we're trying to extract these proteins, that big of a difference will mean that we can lose a lot of protein. So we didn't really want to see a lot of solubility loss, but that can be explained because when the reactive species in the cold plasma interact with the proteins and the protein denatures, and we can just imagine it opening up like this, there will be hydrophobic groups that are exposed, which obviously is going to reduce their solubility, and we see that in that high pH range. Moving forward to water and oil holding capabilities, really no difference at all. So not something we were hoping for, but maybe with different optimizations, we'll see some change there. Now we go to protein or foaming capacity. And we see that even from the very start at 0 minutes, there's a lot more foaming capacity for our protein when applied with cold plasma. It goes back to the hydrophobic groups. And now, at first sight, foaming doesn't seem that important, but we go back to the muffin. When we want our cakes, we want them to be airy, spacious, you want to have a very foamy capacity for it. And one of the biggest things is when we're trying to make a food property or a food product, we want to have the best properties for that product because you can't really just sell crickets here in a Western country. No one's just going to accept crickets. So with something like foaming, we can make something like a muffin, right? We see that this protein powder is going to be better under cold plasma treatments for something like muffins, cakes, and maybe we can make some protein breads out of that. Moving forward under emulsion, in the first minute, we see slight change, but for the rest of it, again, not a lot of change, not really what we want to see. Going down to digestibility. This one is impressive because when we start on our gastric fluid stage, we see that there is a lot more digestibility under gastric fluid with cold plasma. Again, that could just be because we imagine our proteins folded, they could be in these big structures, but because of the cold plasma, they'll open up. They become less dense in a sense. And then going forward in the phases of digestion, we see not much change after that. But under radical scavenging, antioxidants. That's the word I was looking for. So the radical scavenging really tests the antioxidant properties, and obviously we don't want a lot of oxidation. If we look at the pancreatin in the second hour of being in our intestines, it does have more antioxidant properties, which you can go ahead and say that that would be better for our gut health, that it's not oxidizing our intestines. And so, I mean, if we summarize that, we see that we did get a high, about 79.9 or 80% protein extractability from the cricket. So it's high in purity, or not extractability, sorry, but purity. And then we see in that FTIR, there are changes with cold plasma. And then we do have some significant changes, solubility, maybe not something we like, but under foaming, we understand now because of those hydrophobic groups being exposed, we can find food products that fit under, something that needs foaming. And then from there, we'll make our products with that. So to conclude, we do find changes with cold plasma. Of course, it was a 10-week program. I didn't have a lot of time to test the optimizations, maybe different amount of times. It was brought up to me, even the crickets, right? I could use a different species. So there's a lot of optimization changes that could be made, maybe to have, if we need better emulsion, we want better digestibility, we want water and oil holding capacity for these protein shakes, right, in liquid form. But that's something that could be done with further optimization. For now, we do find, yes, cold plasma does actually impact food product development properties of cricket protein, and we can have a future product using cricket protein because of these positive results. And I think I'm open for questions.